Singapore's one of those places where the magic can happen.
I'm fascinated to see how Oscar goes in Singapore, how he bounces back from the disappointment of Baku.
We saw just purely a chink in the armour. We are starting to see Lando be a bit quicker. And that's probably also why Oscar's maybe starting to overdrive a little bit, and why he's maybe feeling the pressure more than he has done.
If there is a sniff of an opportunity, Red Bull is the team that's going to take it.
I still can't see that Max wins it.
I don't want to write him off.
There's a certain level of irony, isn't there, to Sainz getting a podium this year and Hamilton not.
Dinner with James Vowles is obviously a powerful thing to do.
For a few weeks now, I've been going big on Ferrari, but their execution is not there.
I've just got a feeling about Singapore, it could be the moment.
I'm glad you're carrying on the torch of optimism for Ferrari, because I've passed it on to you now.
Hello everyone and welcome to F1 Nation's preview of the Singapore Grand Prix with me, Tom Clarkson, and F1 TV commentator and former Renault driver, Jolyon Palmer. Now JP, we threw you under the bus a little bit with our Baku preview by bringing up a pretty disastrous weekend for you there back in 2017. So let's redress the balance right now and remind you of your performance at Singapore later that year, when you started 11th on the grid.
Jolyon Palmer will pick up a very handy top six finish on a weekend where he learnt that he lost his seats at Renault for next season. Jolyon Palmer.
No.
What's happened here? I think either Jolyon Palmer's transponder has gone, but he just disappeared behind Stoffel Van Dorn on the timing screen on our tracker, Martin. He's ahead of him.
He's just not coming up in the results.
Palmer finishes sixth. They seek him here, they seek him there. He's finished sixth.
Oh, the jeopardy for all the Palmer fans. I had no idea. They must have been heart in mouth at the end there. I honestly thought Crofty in that commentary was going to absolutely do me dirty. Jolyon Palmer finishes sixth on a weekend where he learns how to drive. So what's he going to learn? No, losing the seat.
JP, that was a phenomenal weekend actually. I was there, I remember it, decent quali and a really decent race. Transponder notwithstanding.
Yeah, so I think my transponder just didn't work all year pretty much. So it was always dropping in and out. And when you're outside the points, people don't care so much. When you're P6, it becomes a much bigger issue. So that was a very happy memory. That probably the toughest race I've done, because it was just wet in Singapore, changeable. You've got the slick tyre crossover. It's bumpy. It's so physical. All of the old Singapore stuff is true. It's a really tough, long race. And then you're trying to stay on the tram lines on slicks is tricky. So, happy days. Happy days.
You nailed it. And as Crofty mentioned then, it was a pretty mad weekend for you with the news that you weren't going to be in the team the following year. I remember it, that you went out there feeling you had something to prove, and you did it.
It was nice. It was there was a couple of weeks gap, I think. I'd found out that I was losing my seat, and the feeling in Renault wasn't very good. But I still enjoyed working with my team, with my side of the garage, and always when you have these drivers that are going to lose their seat. Daniel Ricciardo was the guy last year, wasn't he? It was his last race in Singapore too. And you still feel like your engineer, you've worked with them for a while, your mechanics, everyone's still, even if the management, you've sort of had a breakdown in trust, you still feel like there's something in it for you on the day. And yeah, Singapore's one of those places where the magic can happen. And it was, in all of my good results, there's always a dramatic part at the end. So the Singapore was at 2017 was when there was the 3-car pile up at the start. Vettel, Verstappen, Raikkonen are in tears at the first corner. My other great result was Malaysia 2016. I managed to get a point in the Renault the year before, and that was the one where Hamilton had his big end fail and he pretty much lost the championship. And that was me sneaking that last place. That was 11th up to 10th. So yeah, with every championship disaster, there's a little bit of points out of it for me.
Well, you say Singapore is where the magic happens. Let's have a look now as to where we think the magic is going to happen this coming weekend. Now, With 7 races and 3 F1 sprints to go, there are still 346 points on the table. Championship leader Oscar Piastri is 25 points ahead of Lando Norris and 69 points ahead of Max Verstappen. Max has now won 2 and had a second place since the summer break. So let's start with that. He's cut the deficit to Oscar by 28 points. Is he now in this championship battle, JP?
Right, so this is the question I think on everyone's lips, isn't it? And I was pretty quick to shoot anyone down that kept saying after Monza, Max is in it. Max is in it. No way. He's so far away. It's just not possible. And then he's just gone and closed a full 25 points in a weekend. And so obviously the conversation is coming up again with a little bit more ferocity right now. I still can't see that Max wins it. 69 points behind Oscar. You've got Lando there as well. But because it's Max, I think you never say never. The thing is, for me, the Red Bull in the low downforce trim is really good. We expected them to be really strong in Baku. I think we said it as much before the race weekend. Monza, likewise. I'm not so convinced that Max is going to take pole in Singapore. If he does it, then I think he'll be in maybe some contention. But he's going to need some disaster for McLaren still. And I just don't even see, even for Max, I think this is too far. I think he's just going to be swinging away and take some race wins, and you never know.
Well, how much has the RB21 improved? And I think Yuki Tsunoda's performance in Baku is actually a really good reflection on that car, right? He races competitively to P6. You know, he gets that result on merit, which proves, I think, that the car is that much better. Max has never won in Singapore, but he qualified second last year. If the car is that much better, if McLaren... I think the McLaren will be very strong. They're much stronger than it was in Baku. But I don't want to write him off.
Are you're still Jolyon. Believing? It's 3 cars for the title.
Well, and I also think Red Bull are still developing this car. Look at the progress it's made. And I think everyone else has turned the tap off on this year's car and they're focusing on 26. I think there's so much new at Red Bull next year. There's so much uncertainty with the power unit, etc. And that's the thing about Red Bull, right? If there is a sniff of an opportunity, Red Bull is the team that's going to take it. And I think they're going to take this.
Operationally, I think they're very strong. And I don't think that's changed with the management change. I think they've always been there. And Laurent Mekies has obviously come in and they seem to be still really on point. I like the fact that Max seems really galvanised again in the team. It wasn't that long ago, the summer months, and when Christian was still there, Max was refusing to commit his future to Red Bull, even though he had a contract there. You could feel the tension between driver and management, and this was at the same time where there were points slipping away from Max. The Barcelona race was the obvious one where he had his hot-headed moment, cost himself some points, but then there was Austria. Antonelli wipes him out, and that was the way that they fell away. But they have re-galvanised extremely well in the last couple of races. I think earlier on in the season, we would have said fast corners, the Red Bull is good. Slow corners, they're less good. They've clearly cured some slow speed weakness. They've found good balance. They found consistency of balance there. And that is Monza and Baku to a T, really. It's 90-degree corners. There's slow speed. And the car's obviously been really, really quick. Probably is the quickest. But still the big thing for me is what happens on high downforce circuits. And that is Singapore. We're back to a circuit that's like Monaco. It's even like closer to Budapest, where you crank on the wing and it's lower speed corners. And both of those races, Max wasn't fighting for a podium. So we will see. I think it'll be the true test in Singapore. If he wins again and the McLarens are still not putting things together, maybe we can say there's a glimmer of hope. But right now, personally, even though I think they're improving and I think they're on a great trajectory, I think they've got too much to do right now.
I think McLaren will win in Singapore, but after Singapore...
But then it's done, isn't it? Because then you've got
the last 6 races, I think it's game on.
Yeah, but you'll need 15 points a race at that point.
Well, and the McLaren drivers are going to be taking points off each other. Helmut Marko, you mentioned his name a moment ago. He said at the weekend in Baku, Max has got his mojo back. He's properly motivated again. He can smell blood.
And that's what I can see with Laurent coming into the team. It has re-energized him. And I think he's taken on he's always been a leader in the team, but I think he's taken it on to another level. They're really galvanised in terms of the car setup. The amount of times that they were a little bit lost on a Friday and they would scrabble it back together. But Max has taken a lot of leadership and they're following him a lot. The team is potent right now. There's no doubt about it. But it's 69 points, right? There's 7 races to go. My quick maths says he needs 10 points per race on Oscar. So if he wins everything and Oscar finishes third, he'll win it by a point.
You're forgetting the sprints. There's also the sprints.
Okay, there could be another point or two here or there. There's 3 sprints, to be fair. But let's say, as you said, McLaren are quicker in Singapore, which I expect them to be. Then that could suddenly be at least 89 points with 6 races to go. So again, my quick math says that is, 15 points a race suddenly. So Oscar's just got to trundle around in the top 4 or 5, even with the sprints, and he'll do it. So that's the level that they're fighting against now.
Piastri is the back of the field. He's not got away at all.
A horrible getaway for Oscar Piastri, P20 right now.
Yeah, Piastri just went absolutely nowhere as the lights went out. It was like he just had an anti-stall, but I didn't even see the car move at all from 9th on the grid.
The yellow flag is out. That is a massive... He's in the wall. He's out of the race. Oscar Piastri into the barriers, and his Grand Prix ends on the opening lap.
I think a lot, JP, depends on how McLaren and specifically Oscar Piastri bounce back from the disappointment of Baku. I saw a really interesting piece that you did on F1.com about Oscar's problems in Baku. Can we just revisit some of that? What do you think of what went on in Oscar Piastri's world in Baku?
I think we saw just purely a chink in the armour. I think we just saw a driver making a really basic human mistake of just simply getting... I can't see anything that he just got jittery. It must be he got jittery. But it's like... I was trying to relate this across sports, and I was thinking something like the Masters. So you play 4 rounds of golf. Rory McIlroy has played golf for years and years and years. He knows how to putt from 3 yards. But suddenly, you're on the back 9 on the final day, and the basic shots become really tricky, and you tense up, and you start swinging in a weird way. And I think that's what happened to Oscar. I think he starts 9th. He knows he's in the mid-pack. Already, you could say it. The weekend was scrappy for him before. He was, there's other driving style things. He was attacking the brakes probably too much on a circuit that really punishes it. So he crashed, and that's why he's 9th. But let's say, starting from Sunday, starting 9th. So he's a bit tense. You're in the mid-pack of the field in Baku. It's really narrow, especially at turn 2, turn 3, turn 4. The amount of time someone has been bundled into the wall there at the start is pretty high. And he's got his championship rival right ahead of him. And I think he's simply got a bit twitchy. And you can just see him dropping the clutch early. That's just pressure, it's jitters, and then the rest of it is just compounded from the first mistake. So he, instead of just braking and going again, where he probably could have held on to a top 10 place, which is what Fernando did, basically, he then panicked. He knows he's jumped the start. He gets in front of the grid box, hits the brakes, pulls the clutch, but releases the throttle. Then the lights go out and he releases the clutch, but he's got no throttle on anymore. So now he's going to stall the car again. So he has 2 bouts of anti-stall. Then he gets it going again and just trickles away. He's now last. To be honest, the recovery for 4 turns was pretty good. He'd managed to clear 2 cars by the time, I think it was Albon and Gasly he was ahead of in turn 3, then turn 4, and he's on a charge. He's got he's relative red mist, and he's thinking, right, I'm going to clear these tail enders as quickly as possible and just get myself back through. But he's overcooked it then, hasn't he, at turn 5?
How much do drivers try and second guess the lights going out and preempt it?
You can't. You can't.
You can't. Okay.
Do you remember the start?
I thought it looked a little bit like that with Oscar.
So Oscar actually said afterwards, yeah, he kind of did preempt it, but you cannot preempt the lights because there's a random, I think it's anywhere between 2 and 4 seconds, 2 and 5 seconds they can be on. So it can be really quick sometimes, or it can be a long hold, and that's up to the race starter's discretion. There is literally no guessing when it's going to go, and it's 50-50 then. You're going to be jumping half the start. You're going to be looking at absolute Charlie if you start doing that. So you can't preempt the lights. You have to just react. The drivers' reactions are pretty good, but they're also fairly universal. So, when you get the heli shot of everyone launching, it looks like all 20 cars pretty much go in unison, doesn't it? Until someone jumps it with, you could call it a preempt, but that's a terrible decision if he's tried to do that suddenly.
You also say that, maybe it's nerves, maybe it's pressure of the championship, but to use your golf analogy, we're not going down the 18th on the final round yet. We've still got quite a long way to go. I feel it's a bit early for him to be feeling like that.
But we're at the 12th, aren't we? We're at the 12th. It's you know where you're going. But you're at the tricky 12th. It's the par 3 with the water and the bunkers. And it's because it felt like that. We're not there yet, but he's got a lead. He's defending the lead. And this was a tricky hole because it's Baku. And I don't know what you felt, but I felt on Sunday before the race that this is a really big one for the championship, because it felt like one where I thought the McLarens, to be honest, were going to come through for a podium before the start of the race. I thought they'd have enough pace in there, but I thought probably one of them would, and the other one could end up in a collision. They could end up bogged in behind Yuki Tsunoda or George Russell or something. And it felt like it might have been the day to be a good point swing, 8-10 points in the championship. And if that goes for Piastri, if he had cleared Norris on lap 1 and suddenly he's up the road, he is going to be champion. If he takes a 40-point lead away from Baku, he'll be there. But equally, it might be the day where it all goes wrong for him and suddenly Lando's 15 points back. And, it felt like that jeopardy was there. When they start in the top 3, you feel like, okay, they'll be first and second or second and third, or, there's a point swing in it, but it's also much easier to judge in the top 3. You can race Max, that's really difficult, but it's one guy. Whereas you start 9th, you've got Charles Leclerc and Fernando Alonso starting just behind you. They're tigers. You give them half a chance, they'll be through. You've got Hadjar starting ahead. You've got perils all around you, and it's Baku. So I think that's my analogy of the 12th, because it's a tricky, it's not the last hole, but it's a tricky hole to get through.
But what really struck me about Oscar last week is, we all think he's cool, calm and collected, but he had problems every single day. It wasn't one accident on Sunday on the opening lap. It was, we saw an accident on Saturday. We saw a brush with the wall on Friday. And I've been looking back through his races, and I think you have to go back to Austin 2023, his first season, to a weekend where he was sort of off colour the whole time, right? He qualified 10th, whereas Lando started on the front row, and then he retired early doors in the race after a collision with Esteban Ocon. It was just a bad weekend. But in a way, it didn't feel as bad as Baku. It's almost unprecedented for Oscar. So without wanting to get too much into the psychology of it, but JP, you've been a professional sportsman. How do you recover from a weekend like that? How much does Oscar need to look in and try and understand the issues? Or was it just so bad, park it and only look ahead? What do you do?
Normally I'd say park it, look ahead. Problem is the next track's Singapore. So there's similar issues. The street circuit's there again. If you make mistakes, you're going to find the barriers. You're going to be on the back foot. So the other weekend this year where I thought he's looked scrappy was actually Monaco. And he got away with it. But I can't remember the amount of times that Oscar hit the wall in Monaco and got away with it. It seemed like every day, almost every session, there was Piastri's in the wall. There was one moment he took the front wing off in FP2 or FP3. I think it was Saint-Devote. Could have been a corner, and he got away with it.
JP, that's the point. He was just pushing the margins and just glancing, whereas these were, the qualifying crash and the lap 1 crash.
Oh, there
was no coming back from that.
So the other one in Monaco, do you remember he actually hit the wall in the race as well at Saint-Devote and got away with it? He snagged it. It was a pretty mild hit, but he still snagged the rear into the wall. And that was about as entertaining as the front part of the race got at that moment. But that's why I remember it. But you're right. The Baku ones were another level, but also the speeds in Baku are another level. So you are approaching at 200 miles per hour to these braking zones. In Monaco, it's 160 miles per hour. So if you brake 5 meters late in Monaco, you can maybe scrabble the speed as a smaller differential. Whereas if you brake 5 metres late in Baku, you find the concrete barriers, it's still very narrow, and you're going to have a massive hit. And so it felt to me like where he was trying to find the time after a difficult Friday was in just, right, let's attack the brakes, rather than necessarily try and release the brakes or work on the corner exits. It was his style to be really attacking on the brakes, and that's obviously how he naturally wants to drive. But I think when you look back through the incidents, so FP2, he had a pretty solid hit at the barriers after Lando had hit the barriers on the exit of Turn 4, got away with it. Q3, he was actually having an okay time of it in qualifying. It looked like he was going to be back towards a relatively normal sort of top 3 starting place on a hectic day. The rain started to fall, grip levels coming down, and he's still attacking the brakes a lot. So that means that you're way more likely to stuff it into the barriers. If you're a little bit more cautious on the brakes, but you release the brakes and you're hustling it on the entry, you're probably going to have a smaller moment than just locking the brake and never getting it back. And I think that's obviously what he did in qualifying. The grip level was coming down. It was super tricky for everyone. I mean, Leclerc also crashed. Obviously, Lando hit the barriers as well at the end. So he's not the only one, but he hit it the hardest. And then the race, I think the race is a similar looking crash for a similar reason, braking too late, trying too hard, and is still trying to find the time or the position on the brakes rather than trying to release the speed and carry it towards an apex. But it's sort of a different one as well, because he was on the wrong part of the track out wide, and just scruffy generally, and a lot of braking issues for him. Problem is, though, as I said, the next one is Singapore. So you've got the barriers there again, and it's another tricky street circuit, so it will be punishing.
Baku is the only race this year, really, where Oscar, I feel, regressed compared to last year. I know you make a good point about Monaco being scrappy, but I think pretty much every other racetrack we've been to this year, we've seen a huge difference, positive difference between the Oscar of 25 versus the Oscar of 2024. And he's going to need a decent step in Singapore if he's going to challenge Lando, right? He qualified, I think, 0.4 of a second off Lando last year. It was an emphatic weekend for Lando last year, and if Oscar's going to put one over him, he's going to have to take a big step.
Also, the Baku 24 race was like the race of his life still. It was a pretty high benchmark to keep going. But I do think on this, the last few races, I think we are seeing, we're probably about to come to it, but we are starting to see Lando be a bit quicker consistently. So through Monza, Lando was a bit quicker. Through Baku, I felt like Lando was a little bit quicker. I even think in Zandvoort, Lando was a little bit quicker. Didn't do the lap in Q3, but through the rest of the weekend, he was just a little, probably a shade quicker. And that's probably also why Oscar's maybe starting to overdrive a little bit, and why he's maybe feeling the pressure more than he has done.
When you say he's overdriving, is that why he's missing braking points and being too aggressive? When you overdrive, are you invariably aggressive under brakes? Is that what you do?
Yeah, I mean, it's generally it comes from the entry, so it can be just braking too late, and or it can be hustling loads of speed and braking too soft and whatever. You're basically trying to find lap time, but you end up costing yourself more lap time or making mistakes by being aggressive with it. And that's what Oscar was doing. When he crashed, I think he was slightly up on Lando by being aggressive on the brakes, turn 1, turn 2. But then you see the risk around Baku. All these braking zones, they bite when you start to keep doing that, and that's what he did. It felt like he was just pushing and then a little bit of overdriving.
And you don't think his mindset going into Baku had been upset by all of the shenanigans after the race in Monza about team orders, and then he arrives in Baku on the Thursday, he's in the press conference, that's all anyone wants to talk to him about.
Well, what do you think? You were there in the press conference.
No, I thought he dealt with it all very well, with a smile on his face. Although interestingly, someone did come up to me after the press conference, someone who'd been in the room, and said, I'm no body language expert, but Oscar is carrying himself a little differently this weekend. I didn't notice that myself, but it was an interesting observation. And then you go and look and see he was out of sorts all weekend, wasn't he?
I thought it was interesting in that press conference, actually, when you asked him if he would have given up the win, and he had a little retort back, But he sort of he didn't easily say, yeah, I would have given up the win, which is what I thought you'd just say, wouldn't you? Because you don't have to prove it. But it felt like there was a bit of bite in there. But I don't think it translates to being on the track. I think it's when you're on the track, visors down, you're not thinking about the outside noise, you're thinking about lap time, and if the lap time's not there, you start pushing harder, and you start making mistakes.
Talking of mistakes, I'm reminded, we've just been, a little earlier, we were praising Lando for his drive in Singapore last year. He wins by 20 seconds from Max, but do you remember just before half distance, he nearly put it in the barrier?
Oh, yeah.
So it is a track where it does bite.
He had like a 20-second lead as well, didn't he? He was so far clear and nearly Ayrton Sena'd it straight into the wall.
Ayrton Senna,
that's a tough mention for Senna, who did a lot of good. There's one moment where he put it in the wall at Portier.
But who is favourite? Do you think Norris goes in as favourite after the performance he put in last year? And as you say, he seems to, the last couple of races, had the edge over Oscar.
Yeah, I think Norris will be favourite for this one. I think the momentum's starting to go with him. I mean, he obviously had his own pretty tricky weekend last time. So actually, for Oscar sitting on that chair at turn 5, he'd have not been hating the way that Grand Prix was panning out. But the gap's come down anyway to 25, and I think the way that Lando's driving, I think he's getting more comfortable in the car, and he's getting consistent laps out of it pretty well. I know the Q3 one, he tapped the wall, but there was a bit of circumstance in play there. Generally, I think he's a little bit quicker than Oscar in the last few races, and as you say, Singapore was a great track for him last year. He was quick. You turn, you turn up, you've got a spring in your step, and I think that momentum is starting to go to Lando.
Well, look, let's go a little bit further down the order now, because it's a fascinating battle between Ferrari and Mercedes in the Constructors' Championship. Mercedes moved 4 points ahead of the Scuderia in Baku. I don't know, when you look at those two teams, you look at Singapore, you look at the fact that Lewis is a 4-time winner at Marina Bay, Charles Leclerc is a bit of a street circuit specialist. How do you see it playing out between Ferrari and Mercedes this weekend?
Right, so for a few weeks now, I've been going big on Ferrari. And now I'm going to go a bit smaller on Ferrari now after a couple of false dawns. But I still think they have the better car than Mercedes. But their execution is not there. Monza was roughly okay. They probably finished where they roughly deserved, just outside of the podium. But Baku, you've got Hamilton on a used soft tyre trying to get around in Q2 and he goes out. Then Leclerc hits the barriers in Q3 and they end up 10th and 12th on the grid. I mean, that's so far away from what that car should have been capable of. And that seems to be a little bit the story of Ferrari's season, I think. They've got more in there from what they should be posting. And you look at someone like Max, the McLarens generally, even though we talk about little mistakes here or there, and Baku was not a good example, but they are putting the times on the board. George Russell is putting times on the board. Kimi was very good in Baku as well. And yet Ferrari is not necessarily just the team, but sometimes the drivers are making these mistakes. And so again, before Singapore, I think they should beat Mercedes. But I went back and looked at the results from last year. And I looked at qualifying, and Ferrari were 10th and 9th on the grid. And Carlos Sainz had a crash, and Charles Leclerc didn't get a lap time in for going over track limits at turn 2. That just feels like the most Ferrari thing possible on a circuit where they should be quick. The amount of times they have these catastrophic no points out of a race weekend that you've got to be at least getting a top 5. So logic would say they're going to be good again, low speed, better than Mercedes, but they've got to put it on the board.
In the way that Carlos Sainz delivered, when there was the chance of a big result in Baku, Carlos Sainz delivered. Do you think Lewis Hamilton could do that for Ferrari? And he'll be spurred on by the fact, surely, that Carlos has got a podium for Williams before he's got a podium for Ferrari. I don't know. I feel that, as you say, they keep tripping up when they shouldn't, but at some point they're not going to trip over their shoelaces and they're going to deliver. And I've just got a feeling about Singapore. This could be the moment.
I'm glad you're carrying on the the torch of optimism for Ferrari, because I've passed it on to you now. There's a certain level of irony, isn't there, to Sainz getting a podium this year and Hamilton not. Yet Sainz is in the Williams and Hamilton's taken his seat at Ferrari. I don't know. I really thought Baku was going to be the one. They ended Friday 1-2. And I thought this is going to be my genius prediction coming in. Finally, Ferrari going to get their win. But there's always something going wrong for them. And it seems to be going wrong firstly for Lewis at some point, being on the wrong tyre at the wrong time, finding traffic, going track limits, having a big rear lock or whatever in Spa. There's always something that seems to be going wrong for him, and he's very dejected. And then, the other car can be hit or miss. You're absolutely right. That both drivers have got great form in Singapore. The circuit is as close as you can get to Monaco, which is low speed. They qualified, second and fourth? Lewis had his penalty. Charles was very nearly on pole. The car has actually made some steps over the summer since that moment as well, with suspension upgrades, floor upgrades. Obviously, everyone else is moving forward as well. But I think they can be quick. But I'm just a little bit scared to predict that they're going to be really good after the last couple of weekends. So I'll let you do that instead.
What about Antonelli? Let's stick on the Italian theme for a moment. He needed a big weekend in Baku. He did deliver it. And Singapore's a confidence track, right? So that will only have helped him big time going into Singapore.
Yeah, I think good for him to get a result in Baku, because it is also a confidence circuit. They're obviously quite different, but they are street circuits fundamentally, quite narrow, quite punishing. Different ends of the downforce spectrum and the physicality and everything else. But we spoke after Monza, didn't we? And I thought he didn't do such a bad job, but Toto Wolff came out with his underwhelming race, that line that sort of got bandied around. His qualifying pace was pretty good. He was obviously ahead of George. You have to say George was feeling and sounding pretty groggy all weekend. So actually for him to end up second is a pretty phenomenal result, I think. But Kimi did the job that Toto, I think, would have been really happy with. Fourth, not quite a podium, but it was difficult to overtake. And you're right, the confidence that he'll take from just putting a clean weekend on the board when the amount of other big-name drivers were finding barriers, having mistakes, even Hadjar, rookie of the year contender, and he's made a couple of quite significant mistakes at key times. Antonelli's there putting it together. So that's why Mercedes took such a big jump. Before they've been a one-car team really with Russell, but you add in some points for Antonelli and they are going to be a bit of a threat for Ferrari.
And let's not leave Red Bull out of this P2 in the Constructors' Championship conversation. They're only 18 points behind Mercedes now, and if Tsunoda can start scoring points regularly in this rejuvenated car, I think it's a three-way battle for P2.
I think it is, but again, you got obviously Max carrying the burden there at Red Bull. If Max is going to win the driver's title, then Red Bull will probably come second because they'll need all of those points for it. But yeah, it was a good race for Yuki. Just good to have a solid performance. He absorbed pressure late on from Lando pretty well. Absorbed pressure early on from Charles pretty well. So they're good contenders in a Ferrari and a McLaren. He won't start that high up every day. He was lucky to start where he did. Obviously, you've got big names having issues. You've got Leclerc, Piastri in the barriers. You've got Hamilton out in Q2. You've then got Norris hitting the barriers. And he was the last car over the line in Q3. So everything was stacked in his favour to start, sixth position in the end. So there's work for him to do, but at least in the realm of confidence chats, it's a good one for him to get some points. And I still think second driver there will let Red Bull down. I think Max will keep plugging away, but I don't think Yuki will be consistent enough against a Hamilton and probably an Antonelli.
God, it's so funny, isn't it? On the Thursday of Baku, the Italian media was going very strong on Sainz to Red Bull next year. And yet on the Sunday night, Carlos was talking about Williams being his life project to get that team back to the front of the grid. So it was a real sort of silly season.
That is just an absolute synopsis of the F1 media, isn't it?
Yeah.
Suddenly, this is going to happen. No, it's definitely not.
It's definitely not.
Shut the door.
And Carlos, I mean, he was back to his bold best, wasn't he, in Baku? Do you think Williams will be sharp in Singapore as well? They were I seem to remember, just outside the top 10 in qualifying last year at Marina Bay.
I think they'll be flirting with the top 10. They won't be as good, I don't think, as they were in Monza or Baku, but they are a team that they like short radius corners. Long, sweeping, fast turns has never been a good strong point of them. I think Barcelona was a particularly bad weekend for them this year and for every year, really. So the corner layouts will be good. They like a nice long straight as well, which is where their car was really good in the last 2 weekends. I think they've done so much right, haven't they, Williams? And obviously Sainz's podium has taken so much pressure off them in terms of that 5th place in the championship now. And I liked it because you could see the value of a race-winning driver slotting into a midfield team. Because he looked like a front runner. The car was painted blue, but if it was painted red or silver, it would have just looked like, Sainz is doing the job in a fast car. But he was in a Williams, and that's what you get. I think you get an accomplished driver who knows what it's like to be fighting on the front row of the grid. He's not overawed by a big occasion. And he just concentrated on his own pace, on his own race. The car was good, and finally, he almost doubled his points tally.
Dinner with James Vowles is obviously a powerful thing to do. James spoke after the race about him having dinner with Carlos on the Thursday night, and they just laid the cards on the table saying, look, it's been tricky. What more do you need from us, the team? And then let's just exchange ideas, and bang, suddenly 48 hours later he's stood on the podium.
Should we book in a dinner with James Vowles then?
What, for the pod?
For the pod. We're going to take it from strength to strength.
Let's just discuss Williams a little bit more. Are they doing better than you were expecting pre-season?
Yes. Getting a podium, great. Albon's been great. 5th place in the Constructors is as good as anyone could have hoped. I think they're doing better than anyone could have expected, aren't they?
I think given where they were last year, particularly the start of last year.
Do you remember when we arrived in Melbourne? They had a really good pre-season test in Bahrain. I think Sainz was like 2nd quickest. And I think we all started to think, is this the Williams of 1997 again? We were like, is getting really carried away with Williams are back in the golden era. And James Vowles have been saying for the last 6 months of last year that they had the best driver lineup in the field. They came out of the blocks flying, and we were like, hang on, Williams are just genuine front runners. They're not, obviously. But and I think that's why maybe, it feels normal that they're 5th, but they've actually, when you look on year, they've had a really great effort. I like the fact that they signed Sainz. And I know Vowles put so much emphasis on how hard he had to work to get Carlos to come and the project, and now Carlos is saying it's his life's work, and it's great, they're galvanised. But remember last year they had Logan Sargent driving for them for half the year, and then Franco Colapinto. They've come a long way, but just having a race-winning second driver means that they can put a car on the podium when Alex Albon has an off weekend. And probably Albon's found a couple of tenths this year as well. So just focusing on having a really strong driver lineup, I think in that tight midfield, it makes all the difference.
I said to Carlos in the post-qualifying press conference, he just qualified 2nd. I said, well, look, Carlos, the transition to Williams hasn't been the easiest for you this year. And then he interrupts me and he goes, no, the transition's been fine. I've just had a lot of bad luck and da-da-da-da. So he is, despite what's been a very difficult season for him, he is still really happy with the progress they're making for 2026. So let's get the crystal ball out. Next year, Williams, McLaren, Alpine and Mercedes all have the same power unit. Give me 1, 2, 3, 4.
I'm going to be super boring and say the order that we have now. I think McLaren, Mercedes, Williams, Alpine. But it's tough to know, really, isn't it? There is a whole new reg cycle. How much emphasis are McLaren putting on this year? Have Mercedes canned it early on and going to produce something more? It's difficult to imagine Williams making the jump to be on a level with the other two, just because they are such powerhouses of Formula One teams. And Williams are still, it was at the start of last year that James Vowles came in and was like, what are you doing making a spares list on an Excel spreadsheet? We need to update our systems here. And it's a massive undertaking for them to turn it around. New regs will come at a good time. I still think they're not going to be on a par with the others. And then Alpine, I can't help but think they're going to be on the back foot. I thought they'd be better. I thought they'd be quite an exciting prospect, but that's my order.
JP, of those 4 teams, who has the best driver lineup? So you've got Lando and Oscar at McLaren. You've got, let's work on George and Kimi at Mercedes, although that hasn't been announced. You're going to have Alex and Carlos at Williams, and Gasly's been announced, and it looks increasingly likely that it's going to be Colapinto in the second seat. Who's got the best driver lineup?
I think it's again the same order. Tough with Mercedes. I think McLaren have the best lineup of those 4. I think Norris and Piastri are both really high level drivers, and one of them will be a champion. I think Russell is at least in that bracket, maybe better than those 2, but right in that bracket as well. But Antonelli's not there yet. We will see with the second year if he can get more consistent. I think Sainz and Albon are not at Russell's level, but both really good, competent drivers for Williams, and would be great, worthy of a top seat. And then Gasly and Colapinto. Gasly's absolutely solid. Colapinto's still a bit unproven. Do you disagree with any of the synopsis there of team pecking orders, driver pecking orders?
I agree with you that I think McLaren are going to go into next year. It seems to me everything McLaren puts on their car correlates.
That's the key,
on the racetrack. Everything they're doing at the factory seems to work on the racetrack. So that applies to this current set of regs, sure, but there's no reason to see why that won't apply next year as well. And they've got, Rob Marshall, Peter Pedromu, some absolute gold in their design and aerodynamics departments there. So, yeah, I agree. I think in terms of the car, I expect McLaren to be there. Mercedes, I can't understand why they've struggled as much as they have with these current regs. I get, they missed a beat, going for the ultra slim. Do you remember the slim
zero pods
rear end on the car? Okay, fine, that didn't work.
That was 3 years ago now.
Sure, but it's still an inconsistent car, isn't it?
Yeah.
And why shouldn't those inconsistencies apply next year? I see no reason why they shouldn't. There's obviously some correlation issue, brain power issue. I've no idea what.
It's understanding, isn't it, that has been Mercedes' downfall. When they get it right, they have a great car. They've built a great car on 10% of the time. But they don't know why it's not there more than 10%.
And I think they'll win Las Vegas. And then Williams are they're the dark horse, aren't they?
I'd love to see them.
When you look at those teams, JP, and you look at, I mentioned a couple of names at McLaren, and of course there's loads more there, and Andrea Stella and all these stellar people who have had great success in Formula One. You can point at Mercedes and look at a whole bunch of people there, led by James Allison, Simone Resta. All of these people have had great success in Formula One as well. Then you look at Williams, and the only sort of headline engineer there who's had lots of success before is James Vowles, but he's actually the team principal and not the guy designing and building the car. So that's not to say there isn't brilliant talent at Williams, but there's no headline name there that you'd sort of hang your hat on. That's not to say they can't deliver. That's why they're a dark horse, because I don't know just how good they can get. Yes, they turn the tap off this year's car before anyone else, but just how effective is everything back at Grove? We're gonna find out next year, and ditto in a way Alpine as well.
And also, we've just compared them to the other Mercedes runners, but if you compare them to the rest of the field, Aston Martin, Racing Bulls, Haas, I would expect them to be ahead of all of that lot next year. And I think they're the one from the midfield who could become a front runner. Maybe Aston Martin's the Adrian Newey Aston Martin, maybe I shouldn't rule out too quickly. But I still think Williams, with their lineup, with the way the team's going, have the best chance to become a top team again.
Well, who's going to be top this weekend? It's prediction time. I know we spent a lot of this pod making predictions, but let's focus on Singapore now. 62 laps. What do we got? The C3, C4, C5. compounds with us. The C6 we're not seeing again this year. That's what we had in Baku. Give us your top three.
Right, I'm going to go... I've thought long and hard about it this week because I'm off the back of a couple of dud Ferrari predictions. So I am going to let you go for the Ferrari 1-2 and it's all fine. I'm going to go back to basics because I want to get one on the board here. I'm going to go Norris from Piastri, manages to dig in, but it's still Lando. And then Max is third, and that seems to me the obvious top three for Singapore.
I agree on Lando as P1, but I think we're going to see a bit of jeopardy this weekend, and we're going to see Hamilton get his first.
Yeah. There's the Ferrari in.
Hamilton get his first podium, because I do think Singapore is a track where the driver can make that little bit of difference. And
definitely.
So Hamilton for P2, and I'm actually going to put Max in P3, and we're going to have a much closer championship table at the end of the Singapore Grand Prix weekend. Look, anyone else we should be looking out for?
I'll throw a quick question to you.
Go on.
If the championship tape, so if you're right with your prediction and the championship goes down to sort of 12 points, 10 points towards Oscar, do you think then Lando's a heavy favourite for it with this run?
Well, then you look at what races we've got coming up. Lando is always very good at Austin.
Oscar's never really had a great season running. Qatar he's been strong at.
Yeah.
But the other circuits are a little bit unproven for him. I mean, so many he's stepped up this year. I think if the momentum goes like that is...
I'm fascinated to see how Oscar goes in Singapore, how he bounces back from the disappointment of Baku. We've never seen him so out of sorts in a Formula One car as we did in Baku. And I think a lot will rest on the cool, calm, collected Oscar coming back. I think if that returns, Oscar is, I think, still favourite for the championship, irrespective of the point scores after Singapore. But if we see a tentative Oscar who's too aggressive on the brakes, making mistakes, then I think Lando might be your man. But don't leave out Max Verstappen, as I say. Look, one final thought. Anyone else we should be looking out for in Singapore? I mean, you know, Fernando Alonso, 2-time winner. Do we think Aston will be a little bit more competitive in high downforce trim?
Yep.
Even Haas, Nico Hülkenberg qualified in the top 10 last year.
Yep. That midfield battle is so close still, isn't it? Just trying to get a car or two into the points is so critical. And I feel like every weekend, all of those positions, you can be 20th on the grid, or you can have two cars in the top 10. And it's literally a 10th or two in Q1, and then the same in Q2 makes the difference. Alonso, for me, is high downforce. We're back to both Astons having a good chance. I think Fernando, particularly in Singapore, is going to go well. The other one I would say is let's watch out again for Hadjar. High downforce. That car, I know they've just had a great run on the low downforce of Baku, but again, the short radius corners, I think Hadjar on a street circuit is going to do well.
Well, JP, thank you very much. Great to chat to you as ever.
Always a pleasure. It works with the highlight montage at the start. It gets me really fired up for these.
And remember, folks, that in selected countries, you can hear Jolyon's analysis of all the action in Singapore this weekend on F1 TV. And you can keep up to date with everything that happens on and off the track at Formula1.com, the official F1 app, and at F1 on social media. Well, thanks very much for listening. We will, of course, be back on Monday from the Marina Bay paddock with our review of the Grand Prix. F1 Nation is produced by Formula One and Audio Boom Studios.